In today's world where working online is the norm and every aspect of our personal lives being on the internet is standard, it is imperative that we protect this flow of information. In a single browser request to a shopping website, a search parameter hops across multiple services around the world, taking into account a location, country, currency, and a browser history as well. It's no surprise that we can get lower rates while booking flights if we browse in the web browser incognito or the private mode. A major portion of today's internet usage is the ability to send and receive messages on the air. Chat messaging applications like WhatsApp, Telegram, Signal, and many other transfer data over the internet, including our private images, videos, and notes. In spite of repeated assurances, there is always a point of failure in the chain of communication. A dedicated hacker will only need a sliver of information to be able to crack into this channel and intercept all the communication between users. This is where encryption comes into play. There are two types of encryptions, both of which have their advantages and disadvantages. Symmetric encryption and asymmetric encryption are both used extensively in the cybersecurity industry, so covering both of these topics is of utmost importance. Let's start by learning about encryption in general. We're going to take a small recap on cryptography and understand the types of cryptography and our focus for the day. We then dive into symmetric key cryptography and its working. We learn about the terminology behind private key cryptography. We learn the type of ciphers being used today and the advantages of using symmetric key cryptography. Let's have a small recap before we move ahead. Cryptography is the science of encryption and decryption of data to prevent unauthorized access. Encryption is the process of making the plaintext unreadable to any third party which generates the ciphertext. Decryption, a process of reversing the encrypted text back to its original readable format, that is the plaintext. As you can see in the image, the plaintext in the example is the word study. The sender uses an encryption key to convert the plaintext into ciphertext, which will be unreadable to the people who don't have the decryption key. The ciphertext can be a combination of random alphanumeric characters. It is then sent directly to the receiver, who then converts the ciphertext back to the plaintext, that is the word study, using a decryption key. Depending on the type of cryptography being used, the decryption key can be the same key used for the encryption, or it can be completely different. There are two types of encryption in cryptography: symmetric key cryptography and asymmetric key cryptography. Both of these categories have their pros and cons and differ only by their implementation. Today we are going to focus exclusively on symmetric key cryptography. Let us have a look at its applications in order to understand its importance better. This variant of cryptography is primarily used in banking applications where personally identifiable information needs to be encrypted. With so many aspects of banking moving onto the internet, having a reliable safety net is crucial. Symmetric cryptography helps in detecting bank fraud and boosts the security index of these payment gateways in general. They are also helpful in protecting data that is not in transit and rests on servers and data centers. These centers house a massive amount of data that needs to be encrypted with a fast and efficient algorithm so that when the data needs to be recalled by the respective service, there is the assurance of minor to no delay. While browsing the internet, we need symmetric encryption to browse secure HTTPS websites so that we get an all-around protection. It plays a significant role in verifying website server authenticity, exchanging the necessary encryption keys required, and generating a session using those keys to ensure maximum security. This helps us in preventing the rather insecure HTTP website format. So let us understand how symmetric key cryptography works first before moving on to the specific algorithms. Symmetric key cryptography relies on a single key for the encryption and decryption of information. Both the sender and receiver of the message need to have a pre-shared secret key that they will use to convert the plaintext into ciphertext and vice versa. As you can see in the image, the key used for encryption is the same key needed for decrypting the message at the other end. The secret key shouldn't be sent along with the ciphertext to the receiver because that would defeat the entire purpose of using cryptography. Key exchange can be done beforehand using other algorithms like the Diffie-Hellman key exchange protocol, for example. For example, if Paul wants to send a simple message to Jane, they need to have a single encryption key that both of them must keep secret to prevent snooping on by malicious actors. It can be generated by either one of them, but must belong to both of them before the messages start flowing. Suppose the message "I am ready" is converted into ciphertext using a specific substitution cipher by Paul. In that case, Jane must also be aware of the substitution shift to decrypt the ciphertext once it reaches her. Irrespective of the scenario where someone manages to grab the ciphertext mid-transit to try and read the message, not having the secret key renders everyone helpless looking to snoop in. The symmetric key algorithms like the data encryption standard have been in use since the 1970s, while the popular ones like the AES have become the industry standard today. With the entire architecture of symmetric cryptography depending on the single key being used, you can understand why it's of paramount importance to keep it secret on all occasions. The side effect of having a single key for the encryption and decryption is it becomes a single point of failure. Anyone who gets their hand on it can read all the encrypted messages and do so mainly without the knowledge of the sender and the receiver. So it is the priority to keep the encryption and decryption key private at all times. Should it fall into the wrong hands, the third party can send messages to either the sender or the receiver using the same key to encrypt the message. Upon receiving the message and decrypting it with the key, it is impossible to guess its origin. If the sender somehow transmits the secret key along with the ciphertext, anyone can intercept the package and access the information. Consequently, this encryption category is termed private key cryptography, since a big part of the data's integrity is riding on the promise that the users can keep the keys secret. This terminology contrasts with asymmetric key cryptography, which is called public key cryptography, because it has two different keys at play, one of which is public. Provided we manage to keep the keys secret, we still have to choose what kind of ciphers we want to use to encrypt this information. In symmetric key cryptography, there are broadly two categories of ciphers that we can employ. Let us have a look. Stream ciphers are the algorithms that encrypt basic information one bit at a time. It can change depending on the algorithm being used, but usually it relies on a single bit or byte to do the encryption. This is the relatively quicker alternative considering the algorithm doesn't have to deal with blocks of data at a single time. Every piece of data that goes into the encryption can and needs to be converted into binary format. In stream ciphers, each binary digit is encrypted one after the other. The most popular ones are the RC4, Salsa, and Panama. The binary data is passed through an encryption key, which is a randomly generated bit stream. Upon passing it through, we receive the ciphertext that can be transferred to the receiver without fear of man-in-the-middle attacks. The binary data can be passed through an algorithmic function. It can have either XOR operations, as it is most of the time, or any other mathematical calculations that have the singular purpose of scrambling the data. The encryption key is generated using the random bitstream generator, and it acts as a supplement in the algorithmic function. The output is in binary form, which is then converted into the decimal or hexadecimal format to give our final ciphertext. On the other hand, block ciphers dissect the raw information into chunks of data of fixed size. The size of these blocks depend on the exact cipher being used. A 128-bit block cipher will break the plaintext into blocks of 128-bit each and encrypt those blocks instead of a single digit. Once these blocks are encrypted individually, they are chained together to form a final ciphertext. Block ciphers are much slower, but they are more tamper-proof and are used in some of the most widely used algorithms employed today. Just like stream ciphers, the original ciphertext is converted into binary format before beginning the process. Once the conversion is complete, the blocks are passed through the encryption algorithm along with the encryption key. This would provide us with the encrypted blocks of binary data. Once these blocks are combined, we get a final binary string. This string is then converted into hexadecimal format to get our ciphertext. Today, the most popular symmetric key algorithms like AES, DES, and 3DES are all block cipher methodology subsets. With so many factors coming into play, there are quite a few things symmetric key cryptography excels at while falling short in some other. Symmetric key cryptography is much faster variant when compared to asymmetric key cryptography. There is only one key in play, unlike asymmetric encryption,
and this drastically improves calculation speed in the encryption and decryption. Similarly, the performance of symmetric encryption is much more efficient under similar computational limitations. Fewer calculations help in better memory management for the host system. Bulk amounts of data that need to be encrypted are very well suited for symmetric algorithms. Since they are much quicker, handling large amounts of data is simple and easy to use in servers and data farms. This helps in better latency during data recall and fewer mixed packets. Thanks to its simple single key structure, symmetric key cryptography algorithms are much easier to set up a communication channel with and offer a much more straightforward maintenance duties. Once the secret key is transmitted to both the sender and receiver without any prior mishandling, the rest of the system aligns easily and everyday communications becomes easy and secure. If the algorithm is applied as per the documentation, symmetric algorithms are very robust and can encrypt vast amounts of data with very less overhead.
Let's meet Joe. Joe is a journalist who needs to communicate with Ryan via long-distance messaging. Due to the critical nature of the information, people are waiting for any message to leave Joe's house so that they can intercept it. Now Joe can easily use symmetric key cryptography to send the encrypted data so that even if someone intercepts the message, they cannot understand what it says. But here's the tricky part. How will Joe send the required decryption key to Ryan? The sender of the message as well as the receiver need to have the same decryption key so that they can exchange messages. Otherwise, Ryan cannot decrypt the information even when he receives the ciphertext. If someone intercepts the key while transmitting it, there is no use in employing cryptography since a third party can now decode all the information easily. Key sharing is a risk that will always exist when symmetric key cryptography is being used. Thankfully, asymmetric key encryption has managed to fix this problem. This is Baba from Simplilearn and welcome to this video on asymmetric key cryptography. Let's take a look at what we are going to learn today. We begin by explaining what asymmetric key cryptography is and how it works. We take a look at its application and uses. We understand why it's called public key cryptography and then learn a little bit about RSA encryption, and then we learn about the advantages of asymmetric key cryptography over symmetric key cryptography. Let's understand what asymmetric key cryptography is. Asymmetric encryption uses a double layer of protection. There are two different keys at play here, a private key and a public key. A public key is used to encrypt the information pre-transit and a private key is used to decrypt the data post-transit. These pair of keys must belong to the receiver of the message. The public keys can be shared via messaging, blog posts or key servers, and there are no restrictions. As you can see in the image, the two keys are working in the system. The sender first encrypts the message using the receiver's private key, after which we receive the ciphertext. The ciphertext is then transmitted to the receiver without any other key. On getting the ciphertext, the receiver uses his private key to decrypt it and get the plain text back. There has been no requirement of any key exchange throughout this process, therefore solving the most glaring flaw faced in symmetric key cryptography. The public key known to everyone cannot be used to decrypt the message, and the private key which can decrypt the message need not be shared with anyone. The sender and receiver can exchange personal data using the same set of keys as often as possible. To understand this better, take the analogy of your mailbox. Anyone who wants to send you a letter has access to the box and can easily share information with you. In a way, you can say the mailbox is publicly available to all, but only you have access to the key that can open the mailbox and read the letters in it. This is how the private key comes to play. No one can intercept the message and read its contents since it's encrypted. Once the receiver gets its contents, he can use his private key to decrypt the information. Both the public key and the private key are generated, so they are interlinked, and you cannot substitute other private keys to decrypt the data. In another example, if Alice wants to send a message to Bob, let's say it reads "Call me today," she must use Bob's public key while encrypting the message. Upon receiving the cipher message, Bob can proceed to use his private key in order to decrypt the message, and hence complete security is attained during transmission without any need for sharing the key. Since this type of encryption is highly secure, it has many uses in areas that require high confidentiality. It is used to manage digital signatures, so there is valid proof of a document's authenticity.
With so many aspects of business transitioning to the digital sphere, critical documents need to be verified before being considered authentic and acted upon. Thanks to asymmetric cryptography, senders can now sign documents with their private keys. Anyone who needs to verify the authenticity of such signatures can use the sender's public key to decrypt the signature. Since the public and the private keys are linked to each other mathematically, it's impossible to repeat this verification with duplicate keys. Document encryption has been made very simple by today's standards, but the background implementation follows a similar approach. In blockchain architecture, asymmetric cryptography is used to authorize transactions and maintain the system. Thanks to its two key structures, changes are reflected across the blockchain's peer-to-peer network only if it is approved from both ends. Along with asymmetric cryptography's tamper-proof architecture, its non-repudiation characteristic also helps in keeping the network stable. We can also use asymmetric cryptography combined with symmetric cryptography to monitor SSL or TLS encrypted browsing sessions to make sure nobody can steal our personal information when accessing banking websites or the internet in general. It plays a significant role in verifying website server authenticity, exchanging the necessary encryption keys required, and generating a session using those keys to ensure maximum security instead of the rather insecure HTTP website format. Security parameters differ on a session-by-session basis, so the verification process is consistent and utterly essential to modern data security. Another great use of the asymmetric cryptography structure is transmitting keys for symmetric key cryptography. With the most significant difficulty in symmetric encryption being key exchange, asymmetric keys can help clear the shortcoming. The original message is first encrypted using a symmetric key. The key used for encrypting the data is then converted into the ciphertext using the receiver's public key. Now we have two ciphertexts to transmit to the receiver. On receiving both of them, the receiver uses his private key to decrypt the symmetric key. He can then use it to decrypt the original information on getting the key used to encrypt the data. While this may seem more complicated than just asymmetric cryptography alone, symmetric encryption algorithms are much more optimized for vast amounts of data on some occasions. Encrypting the key using asymmetric algorithms will definitely be more memory efficient and secure. You might remember us discussing why symmetric encryption was called private key cryptography. Let us understand why asymmetric falls under the public key cryptography. We have two keys at our disposal. The encryption key is available to everyone. The decryption key is supposed to be private. Unlike symmetric key cryptography, there is no need to share anything privately to have an encrypted messaging system. To put that into perspective, we share our email address with anyone looking to communicate with us. It is supposed to be public by design so that our email login credentials are private and they help in preventing any data mishandling. Since there is nothing hidden from the world, if they want to send us any encrypted information, this category is called the public key cryptography. There are quite a few algorithms being used today that follow the architecture of asymmetric cryptography, none more famous than the RSA encryption. RSA encryption is the most widely used encryption or public key encryption standard using asymmetric approach. Named after its founders, Rivest, Shamir, and Edelman, it uses block ciphers to obscure the information. If you are unfamiliar with how block ciphers work, they are encryption algorithms that divide the original data into blocks of equal size. The block size depends on the exact cipher being used. Once they are broken down, these blocks are encrypted individually and later chained together to form the final ciphertext. Widely considered to be the most secure form of encryption, albeit relatively slower than symmetric encryption algorithms, it is widely used in web browsing, secure identification, VPNs, emails, and other chat applications. With so many variables in play, there must be some advantages that give asymmetric cryptography an edge over the traditional symmetric encryption methodologies. Let's go through some of them. There is no need for any reliable key sharing channel in asymmetric encryption. It was an added risk in private key cryptography that has been completely eliminated in public key architecture. The key which is made public cannot decrypt any confidential information, and the only key that can decrypt doesn't need to be shared publicly under any circumstance. We have much more extensive key lengths in RSA encryption and other asymmetric algorithms like 2048-bit key and 4096-bit keys. Larger keys are much harder to break into via brute force and are much more secure. Asymmetric key cryptography can be used as a proof of authenticity, since only the rightful owner of the keys can generate the messages to be decrypted by the private key. The situation can also be reversed. Encryption is done using a private key and decryption is done by the public key, which would not function if the correct private key is not used to generate the message, hence proving the authenticity of the owner. It also has a tamper protection feature, where the message cannot be intercepted and changed without invalidating the private key used to encrypt the data. Consequently, the public key cannot decrypt the message, and it is easy to realize the information is not 100% legitimate when and where the case requires.
Hope you learned something new today. If you have any questions regarding this video, feel free to let us know in the comments below and we will get back to you as soon as possible. Subscribe to our channel for more videos like this, and thank you for watching.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simplilearn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.